And you're very welcome along. If it's your first time to listen to the podcast, please go and discover the rest of it. UrbanGym.ie, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. My name is Ken McGuire, joined as always by Urban Gym's Andy Murphy, and today by a man who's a health and wellness expert. He's a founder of My Nutrition Ireland. And for the benefit of tonight and for this month, it's a guy who knows a hell of an awful lot about sleep. So we're going to be picking his brains about that. Mr. Tom Coleman, how are you, sir? How are things?
I am excellent. How could you not be great in this weather? I mean, it's unreal, isn't it?
It's crazy. It's like 25 degrees. It's probably the hottest and best weather we've seen in an age. And here's three of us sat in front of screens doing a podcast.
Speak for yourself, Ken. I'm just after 3 hours kind of hedge outside. So, as I said, I'm ready for bed after this conversation. I got my pajamas here, so I'm going to send me to sleep now after this, please God.
I think half the world is having Zoom meetings, you know, and we don't know what's going on. Like they're in their pajamas, or we're not sure what they're wearing, you know.
How the other half are living. For people who aren't indulging in the video side of things, Andy is very kindly modeling his lovely check type of pajama pants that are slowly occupying the part of the screen that we can't see. For this month, it's obviously sleep is high on the agenda. Tom, myself and Andy were talking. We're kind of tic-tacking and throwing questions back and forth to each other to kick off the podcast. So to open it up,
sure.
How did you wind up with an interest in sleep and all things sleep?
Yeah, I mean, like I think I've always been into fitness in some way myself. Over the years, like from a very young age, I done. Not to name drop around, but I done a podcast last week with Dave Gillick, you know, and like I remember athletics. I actually asked my mum to dig out some old photos, like back in the day, you know, and like our family were mad into athletics. Like I was competing at national level when I was kind of 11 or 12, you know. I won a couple of Connacht titles and all that, and so we were always into fitness or sport or something or other. So like, you know, I was passionate about it. And I've surfed, I've cycled, I've ran, I've played football, I give at and go, I love it. And I suppose I went to college and I studied it then. Well, I actually studied health science and physiology, exercise physiology. That was my kind of background. But nutrition I was always interested in nutrition. So when I finished college, I started kind of looking into the various aspects and the various things that kind of drove our physiology in terms of recovery and performance. Because again, that was my kind of area of interest. And my wife is a chef, and we ended up setting up My Nutrition Ireland because it's very, like, everyone knows, right, what they shouldn't be eating. Yeah. I remember recently enough, I done 24 consultations for a company. And I think all 24 people walked into the room and said, I know what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. Nobody needs to be told, don't do this, because we know, right? We give ourselves a hard time. So the next obvious question is, well, what should I do? Like, what should I eat, or what's right? You know, so that was my kind of, that's where I stepped in. And we set up My Nutrition Ireland about 8 or 9 years ago. And then, of course, the question came, what are the most powerful drivers of recovery? Like my kind of area of interest, right, was when any athlete finishes training and then they go home and they do whatever they do, and then the next day they set foot in the gym or in the training session or with their coaches or whatever else. That time frame is hugely important. And like, if you look at the model of human performance, you have hydration, you have nutrition, you have strength and conditioning, you have psychology, you've skill acquisition, you've all these elements. And like, in the world we live in now, even in the last 5 or 10 years, like, there's a huge amount of science in that, right? And if you go to, say, inter-county teams, you look at the training sessions they're doing, you look at the strength and conditioning they're doing, not a huge degree of difference there. But what no one really seems to, what hadn't been talking about at that point was the recovery aspect. And I kind of started digging in deeper, going, what has the biggest return on investment? Would it be another like protein shake? Or would it be another session in the gym? Or would it be an ice bath? And what would it be? And that was my kind of nearly obsession, right? How can I speed up recovery? How can I enhance recovery? And then I started finding out, or listening to podcasts, reading research papers, everything. And sleep just was there. And that was coming from the US. And I discovered that like teams like the Seattle Seahawks in American football and the Chicago Cubs started to analyze and monitor their sleep with like really cutting edge technology. So that's where it began for me about 8 or 9 years ago. And once I started reading into it and actually looking at not just like perceived benefits or sort of soft kind of, I feel better, like actually solid science, like peer-reviewed, empirical, we can measure it again and again and again and get the same result kind of science.
No, sugar. Flip. Have I gone?
It happened yet now, but Ken.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
Ken is back. He's back.
He's back. I thought I put you to sleep there, Ken.
No, I'm sorry. I'm back. I got kicked out of the call. Just to go back to that, Tom. Sorry. So Seattle and the Cubs, you were saying. So they're digging into this with like big technology. The science is there. It's been peer reviewed and everything.
Yeah. Well, all the top coaches started telling their athletes, because like, okay, the traditional thing is like, you work hard, you have to work harder, you do more, sweat more, work more hard. And especially, I know it's an Irish thing, it's certainly a GA thing, maybe. I was like, and like, I get it, like, we get that you have to work. No one ever says rest harder, do they? No one ever turns around and goes, listen, I want you to recover harder, And it actually makes sense. Like, no one ever says sleep harder, But like, if I measure two guys and I measure the amount of work to put in, if I measure the food that they've had, if I measure the electrolytes and their nutrition and their hydration, and then I measure their sleep, I can find a huge difference in things like reaction time that are instantaneous, that are very predictable, So when the top coaches in America started telling their players, I don't want to see you in here, they moved training times to 12 o'clock in the day, to start at 12 o'clock in the day, professional athletes, and started sort of looking at where can we help them to maybe take a 90-minute cycle of sleep in the middle of the day to enhance recovery as well.
Wow.
Because like, the tiny percentages and differences in teams are so small. It's these other things that I start looking at then, to get the edge. I actually got to work with the technology that the Seattle Seahawks used and the Chicago Cubs used, because they worked with a company called Fatigue Science in the US. And Fatigue Science's technology was developed by the US military for their fighter pilots. These guys wear this wearable tech on their wrist, and it gave them a fatigue score out of 100. And they also knew that if the fatigue score dropped beneath, say, 85, the reaction time would be down by 5%, and that was significant. So they would be sent home to sleep if their scores were below a certain level. And the model that I used was actually a predictable model. You could actually drag it forward, and you could predict with a 96% accuracy mental fatigue levels and reaction times as far as sort of eight hours ahead.
Right.
So I actually got to work. I was the first guy in Ireland to use this tech, and it's actually used by NASA and Harvard. It's the gold standard of sleep measurement. Apart from the polysomnography, which is when they put the hat on with all the wires, right? But this is validated against that, and it's about 94% accurate against the gold standard. So I got to use that with some athletes I was working with.
Based on all of that, do we undervalue sleep?
Oh, completely. Matthew Walker is a guy that a lot of people have heard of because he published a book last year, and it was called Why We Sleep. And he's a neuroscientist who spent 20 years studying sleep. And Matthew Walker is quoted as saying, "Sleep is probably the most under-abused legal performance enhancer."
Nice,
and we can actually go through like different elements of recovery things apart from motor reaction time. We can talk about body composition, we can talk about stamina, we can talk about sprint speed. It impacts all of those. Your endocrine system, your hormones, you know. So it's hugely undervalued. It's hugely undervalued. And we have a stigma, especially in Ireland, towards sleep as well, because we have that thing of, he's a great fella, he was up early this morning. What time were you up at? You know, you get this thing. And I was kind of brought up with this kind of thing as well, you know. My uncle-in-law, he was a sailor, and like the earlier you're up, you know, and he's kind of an older guy, and he comes up and he goes, what time were you up at? And I said, I was up at the crack of noon. Yeah, just to wind him up. But it's a badge of honor, you know, the harder you work, the earlier you're up. But actually, no, the message is we are really suffering as a society because we are undervaluing sleep.
How much sleep do you reckon, say the general Irish person, like athletes aside, how much sleep do you reckon the average Irish person gets?
They're getting less than they should. The average Irish person is getting 7 hours or less than 7 hours. According to data, they're getting less than 7 hours. We should be getting 7.5 to 8 hours. I'd say that figure is probably going down all the time, and especially in the last 5 years of what I've seen. I speak on sleep every day of the week, nearly, I certainly was before COVID hit in, and I'm still doing a lot with multinational companies on sleep. But we're somewhere about mid-table. The Japanese are the worst sleepers in terms of the amount they're getting per night. But you know, as a society as a whole, we've pushed our going to bed time back by about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's there's a number of reasons behind that. You know, artificial light being probably the main one. In environmental conditions like heat. So our houses now are nice and we've an even temperature throughout. And that's one of the key cues to tell our body to sleep if you get cold. Yeah. It's part of our circadian rhythm. It's part of we have an internal 24-hour clock in our brains, in our organs, in our systems, in every single cell in our body. There is a 24-hour clock. It's amazing to think that in every cell there's a clock to tell that cell and that system what to do. You know, and we don't listen to it, and we're messing it up with blue light and with caffeine and alcohol, and yeah.
So is there a big difference then, or is maybe what I'm going at is where does the benefit lie then for that extra half hour to an hour? So if we need to be looking at 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, but for Joe Blogs and they're getting 7 hours to 6.5 hours, where does the benefit lie in kind of in topping?
Well, if you look at when we evaluate fatigue and sleep, we wouldn't look at one night. We'd look at a week or 10 days, right? Because we want to avoid what we call accumulated sleep debt. And when we sleep in 90-minute cycles. Like, how do I know if you're asleep or if you're unconscious or if you're, you know, meditating or whatever? And how I know is we measure brainwave activity. and your brain waves change and in different depths of sleep, different states, right? So all of us sleep in these 90-minute cycles. So the recommendation is 5 90-minute cycles. That's where the 7.5 hours come from, right? More accurate way of saying that it might be 35 cycles a week, right? So if we're skimming off an hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, like I would think myself anyway, that probably people are getting maybe probably about 6 hours, 4 cycles. They're probably getting 4 decent cycles. I mean, if people aren't getting to bed on time and then they're setting their alarm for half an hour, 45 minutes into a cycle, they're going to be waking up in a very deep part of the sleep cycle. Because what happens in the sleep cycle is we drift away into sleep in stage 1. Stage 2, our heart rate drops, our core body temperature drops, and that causes a rise in melatonin, and that pushes you into deep sleep. And then you dream, and that's a light phase of sleep. So the return on investment, to answer your question, is they're not getting that restorative phase, especially if it's towards the end of our sleep. We're looking at the psychological repair. A lot of physical, what happens when we sleep? Physical repair and psychological repair. Our dream state extends after each 90-minute cycle. Or the first cycle, it's 10, 15 minutes, and then it starts getting longer. A lot of the physical restorations are happening in the earlier phases, and then in the later phases, a lot more of the psychological stuff. So memory. I mean, we hear about grey matter, sign of intelligence. So we have grey matter and white matter in the brain. So the amount of grey matter you have is dependent on the quality of sleep you're getting. So when you start to look at it from that point of view, you think, right, I'm cutting off half an hour a night every night. I'm disrupting that. Your brain has to clean itself at night. I mean, if you talk to guys about physical fitness and you talk about recovery, and they'll understand like your lymphatic system in the body. If we look at the human body, you see that the circulatory system is compromised of your blood vessels and your lymphatic system, which cleans out metabolic buildup in the body after you've exercised, for example. But if you see a map of that in the body, it doesn't extend to the brain. The lymphatic system stops at the neck. So the brain must also clean itself, and it does that at night by flushing water, cerebral fluid. Mm-hmm. It flushes cerebral fluid in through the channels of your brain, and we have a plaque buildup in the brain, so it flushes that plaque out. That's one of the key functions. So if you're missing out on sleep every night, you're missing out on a little bit of that, and the memory consolidation as well, and the reaction time as well. So it's the accumulation.
It all starts to add up. Does
volume?
Sorry, go ahead. I missed that. I didn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. Does with the okay, I'll put it this way. Would you believe somebody who says that they can function on 2, 3, 4 hours sleep? And how long do you think that person could function?
I mean, you can. I'll put that into something. I mean, we're such an amazing piece of machinery, the human brain, the human body, that you can literally throw anything into it, and it will find a way to function. Right. So, like, I'll give you an example. Look at an alcoholic who does nothing but drink alcohol all day, every day. He's not getting vitamins, minerals, fiber, essential amino acids. I mean, he's getting alcohol. He's getting calories from alcohol, 7 calories per gram. But yet he will live for years and years and years and years and years and years. It's almost the same with sleep. You can function, but I can guarantee you this, and like this is where these guys, these powerful CEOs who tell people, you don't need sleep. I only get 3 or 4 a night, and I'm great. the damage they're doing to themselves and the functionality, it doesn't equate. I mean, Harvard have tested this where they've got the same people and they've given them 3 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep, and 8 hours sleep, and they've tested them on cognitive tasks. And it's not like 30 or 40 or 50%. It's coming back 100%. Or coming back here. The ones who get more sleep are performing better every single time. So whatever people may tell you, see, even sleep reporting isn't accurate. Self-reporting. Self-reporting is 50 to 60% accurate, which is amazing. You see, you know, how did you sleep last night? Well, I mean, it's hard to quantify anyway. If I ask you, how did you sleep? You go, ooh, yeah, pretty good. Right, but you can't really measure how many wake episodes you had, maybe, or because you might remember more. You don't know how deep you went in the deep restorative phases. You don't know, you know, there's a lot you don't know. So we're not good at self-reporting, and that's open for bias as well. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm a scientist, and I want to measure, get a result, and see if I can get the same result again by measuring it, you know, the methodologies, the tools, all that kind of stuff. Repeatability, that's one of the measures of science, right? Yeah. Validity is a measure of accuracy, and reliability is a measure of consistency. And that's why I got to use that tech, and I could predict your reaction time before you knew it, you know. Wow. I mean, I've worked, just even idea about self-reporting and sleep. I work with a guy, and he said to me, I've got terrible sleep, Tom. I mean, I wake up, I'm very restless all night. I put one of these devices on him, and he had one of the best sleep patterns I've ever seen. But half an hour before he woke, every morning, half an hour before he woke, he was very restless. And so that's all he remembered. And I know now from my research that you can't recall the very deep restorative phases of sleep. You will only recall the poor sleep when you wake up. Oh, terrible sleep. So,
Andy, how's your sleep been?
Yeah, so it's got better now because, well, my kids are getting a little bit, I say older, like Brooke is now 1.5 years. But one massive thing that did change me in my sporting career was when a child came along. Like, I always valued sleep, and I did understand that, you know, it's a major part of a recovery. And I think what Tom mentioned there about, I think the big difference between maybe an amateur athlete and a professional athlete is how you recover between your sessions. Like, and there's a massive difference. Like when I was at Alpha Male, like the guys were getting maybe their cryotherapy, they were doing a lot of, say, they had the nutritionist, they were doing their yoga. Yeah. There was a lot of effort put into recovery between the 3 sessions that they would do a day. It was very much a professional lifestyle. And what Tom mentioned there about a lot of maybe amateur athletes, maybe even GAA athletes, is there's a mentality that you got to keep going harder. And there's maybe that old school methodology where, you know, how do we train hard? How do we, you know, if you've lost the game at the weekend on a Saturday or Sunday, there's still that mentality sometimes to run the team into the ground on the Tuesday when they're back training. Whereas I think professional sport, that mindset isn't there anymore. But for me, you're coming back to my own sleep. When we had our first child, Nathan, that's when things did start to change for me, even as an athlete, whereby, you know, it was a lot harder. I used to remember my toughest sparring day would always be in Dublin on a Saturday up at Team Rhino. And one thing that I always recall is Friday nights, my sleep would be terrible. I don't know if it was because of a psychological thing, knowing that tomorrow I've got to drive 2 hours to Dublin to spar some of the best guys, not just in the country, but Europe. But also I found that those nights were the nights that Nathan maybe would have been up crying, or Brooke, since, you know, before the Bellator fight, Brooke would have been up crying, and my sleep would have been disturbed. And because I knew the importance of sleep, that then affected how I was feeling then as well, thinking, geez, I got a crap night's sleep last night, I'm going sparring maybe Reds or tomorrow, you know, his circumstances may be different, no kids, you know, pure pro MMA fighter, and I'm like, I'm after working a full week, I've got no sleep last night, and I got to drive 2 hours and I got to spar these guys. I am shot. So sleep plays a huge role, and a question I was going to ask Tom was also, I've seen a lot of UFC fighters maybe become parents. Like, perfect example would be Cody Garbrandt. He was the UFC bantamweight champion, and he became a parent. And then his next fight as a father, he lost his title to TJ Dillashaw. And another guy who was, I think, the middleweight champion for a couple of years was Chris Weidman. And when he had his most recent child, that was actually when he lost his belt. So I started to maybe see a bit of a pattern here. And a lot of people may be saying that, you know, the hunger wasn't there anymore because they've reached the championship status. But I was looking at it from a parent's perspective where, you know, I know the effect that becoming a dad for the first time can have. And, you know, sleep is a massive part. And for me, I found my sleep was affected, but also when I slept in another room, say Marina up that night, fair enough, I might be trying to get a full 8 hours, but subconsciously, I felt guilty as a parent that, you know, Marina was having to get up and maybe feed Nathan or Brooke or change a nappy while I was in another room trying to get sleep so that I could perform. My sleep actually wasn't that great, even though I was in a different room, maybe during the camp, you know, so.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, we cannot ever underestimate how sensitive we are to this stuff. And I'll give you a few examples. So, like, if you were back in the day when you could travel, if you were flying out on holiday, you know, that night, you don't sleep. You're waking up every couple of hours, checking the alarm. You don't sleep. If you have an important presentation, if you have something big happening, a game, if you fight or whatever. I mean, like, you know, we're very sensitive. We know from research, right, from measurement, that if you stay in a hotel, 2 hemispheres of your brain, one of them acts as normal, goes into very shallow sleep and very deep sleep, no problem. The other hemisphere of the brain won't go into very deep sleep, won't go into as deep wave pattern sleep. So you essentially get 3/4 of the sleep if you're sleeping in an unfamiliar environment, in like a hotel. So it's, I suppose, with athletes, I'm a huge believer, like, in mindset. Some of the barriers that some of the first barriers that I come across with sleep and nutrition over the years is people saying, can't do that. I can't nap. You know, and I'm like going, listen, unless you have a physiological reason, unless you have very low melatonin, unless you have sleep apnea, unless you have some kind of issue here, some medical issue, there's no reason why you can't, you know. So I think mindset is huge, and it's like, you know, with some of the athletes I've worked with, they're like, they've been doing their routines and their training, and they have that kind of mindset of, like, you know, like, no matter what, like, I can do this, you know. But as a parent, then, I mean, like you said, everything changes. And, like, sometimes, and one of the things I know from being a parent, a new parent as well, like, you know, sometimes the short term clashes with the medium term or long term. Like, I miss out because I'm sitting in here doing Zoom meetings sometimes, and he's out there shouting for dada and all that, like, and I'd love to be out playing with him, but, like, you know, and I feel guilty as well. And you're there going, you know, I'm there going, like, I miss out so much, and he roared for me, but, like, you know, that's his long-term benefit in the future. So, but it's very difficult, and it's an interesting thought experiment, or it's an interesting experiment actually, to look at some of these guys and go, well, how many of them lost their fights after becoming a parent, you know.
On that 3/4 sleep side of things, Tom, when you're traveling, how do you prepare for something like that, or is it something that an athlete does need to prepare for? So
it is. It certainly is. For the most part, we don't know this, but we have the untrained mind. A guy called Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence, a book that people are very familiar with. He also wrote a book on meditation called Altered Traits. And this guy is a Harvard scientist, and himself and a colleague from Harvard are avid meditators and have been for about 40 or 50 years, but they actually applied their scientific rigor to it and wrote a book. And he talks about the untrained mind. And, you know, especially in the Western world, I suppose we have a very untrained mind. We don't even think about that. So I believe, and he believes, that we can kind of we can train our minds, and we can train ourselves to sleep, and we can train ourselves very well. And he's proven that. Now with some of the athletes I worked with, for example, the rugby guys, so they would have their eye masks, and I would tell them to bring their whatever pillowcase they had in their bed with them.
As in their pillowcase from home, like?
Yeah, from home. Whatever ritual they had 15, 20 minutes before bed, to do the exact same ritual. And, you know, within psychology, I've learned since that's called cueing control. I do this, it's like a Pavlovian response, right? Pavlov's bell with the dog, right? So if I do this, then this will happen, and I will get this result, and then that will happen. And the more they're like that, the more familiar their ritual can be, and even that subconscious smell of their own home from their own pillowcase. I mentioned sensitivity. That's enough. That will actually help them feel like they're at home. You know, it's controlling, and any athlete control the controllables. So you control the light, the temperature, the smells, the sounds, all the inputs, all the environmental inputs, the sensory inputs, and the psychological inputs. So I would say that you can train yourself to that will help your brain, that you won't have 3/4 of the sleep. You'll have more than that. Mm-hmm. But that all starts with the belief that you can, or the belief that you can't. I mean, if you say, "Oh, I just can't," you know, you're forever stuck in that thought, aren't you? You're forever not going to be, because you're reinforcing it every time you say it. I can't. Of course you can't. You know, so you have to come to believe that maybe you can.
Marina calls me the nap king. Oh, I can, Tom. I can nap. I can nap, baby. You don't have to ask me twice, Tom. You're my sleep coach while fighting. I take a nap any day, my friend. But I think more so when I became a parent as well, you know, the early morning sessions, and then, you know, I would always normally get a midday nap, like a siesta. But it's trying to find out, I guess, as an athlete sometimes, Tom, is the right length of time for a nap.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I found, you know, sometimes I could easily drift off, and if I had the time, I'd normally try and get the 90 minutes, but sometimes it'd be a 45 nap. But some people have said, like, is 30 minutes enough, or would you be saying
you do
90?
It's a good question. So just to go back on the sleep cycles, and it's just a good thing for people to know anyway, because you should be planning your sleeps and your naps. I mean, if I have to get up at 6, for me to get 7.5 hours, I should be asleep at 10:30, which means I should be in bed at 10, which means I should be unwinding from 9. I have, like, what I call a reverse snooze button. So you set the alarm to okay, now it's time to go to bed. Now it's time to shut off the phone. That's it. Go to bed. Plan it. So with your naps, because if you don't, what's going to happen is your alarm is going to possibly go off in the middle of a deep cycle. And how are you going to feel? You're going to feel absolutely terrible. And it's happened. It's happened to all of us, that the alarm goes off and you're like, oh my God, I was in a really deep sleep. Oh God, you feel like hell, right? So with the naps, generally the advice is not more than half an hour or 90 minutes, right? Now, according to NASA, and who am I to argue with NASA, the optimal time for a sleep is 26 minutes. Don't know how they are to 26, but 26 apparently is the sweet spot. So, but you have to be able to predict with a great degree of accuracy how long it will take you to fall asleep. But again, if you're the type of person that can train themselves, like I had a friend like you, Andy, and he was amazing. He had hammocks. There was 2 or 3 hammocks in the house, and they had 2 young kids, and then they had twins. So they went from 2 to 4. So, and then, but this guy, I know, this guy was like, This guy was like, so he'd 4 under 4 in nappies, you know. But like,
wow.
He went from, you'd be in the house, and next thing you'd be going like, where's he gone? Where's Juan? And he'd just go, and he'd come back 20 minutes, half an hour later, like, oh, I had a nap, I feel great. And I seen him do it. I seen him just disappear into the hammock. And I swear to God, he would be asleep in less than a minute. Incredible. So like, that's what I call talent. Yeah. But like, you know, the US military train all their new recruits on how to fall asleep quickly. Because they call it sleep is a weapon. That's what they say. So, you know, you can. And I was doing a talk one time at a company, and I said this. I said, the US military train their new recruit. And this guy said, I tried the technique, didn't work. And I said, all right, how many times have you tried it? Twice. I was like,
well trained.
I was like, listen, they do it every night for 6 weeks, and at the end of that, they report a 98% success rate. You know, so like, that's what we have to try and train ourselves to do.
The mindset, though, Tom, isn't it? You know,
it really is. It really is. You know, the untrained mind, the barriers that we put in front of ourselves. So much, you know, I can't do that, or I don't like that, or just, you know, you meet like the guys that make it as pro athletes. They have to get a lot right. Like they might have a lot of different things. They have an amazing work ethic. Yeah. They may be talented. They may not be talented, and you know, that there's nothing that bugs me more than talent. You know, some people would even say there's no such thing, but. You know, I think the mindset is one of the key things that you know, these guys are just like, no matter what happens, no matter how many failures I've had, and I'm actually brilliant at failure, because I've failed gloriously so many times in life and business and training and nutrition. You know, this is my wife, so you're just very stubborn. But it's that mindset of, I don't care how many times I'm going to go at it again, you know. So I think mindset for me is huge. But actually that's one of the things that we haven't brought over from the East. I've spoken about meditation, but I haven't spoken about the other element from the other philosophies in the East that talk about visualization. That's a huge part of it, is visualizing yourself doing it successfully. You know, and that's, again, if you know, dealing with athletes, they do a lot of that visualization, because that gets stored in the same place in the brain as memory. So you know, at some level, at the subconscious level, you've won the race, or you've won the fight, or you know.
Do you visualize sleep?
Why not? Absolutely, why not? I mean, it's what happens is, like, for my process, I have created my ritual for sleep, which there's a guy called James Cleary, and he's a behavior change expert. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, and he talks about this, right? So you might have a ritual, and it might involve music, it might involve stretching, it might whatever it involves. You kind of build this ritual to get you into the most amazing mindset for an event. That could be sleep, could be, you know, and then you start to compress it. So you train your brain, and then you start to compress it. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, I know that that's a natural part of sleep. We call it's not called sleep, actually. It's called sleep-wake cycles. So waking up is natural. A lot of people don't remember it. Some people do. People who generally wake up are like, oh my God, I'm awake again, right? But I just have my ritual, because I know, okay, that's cool. That's my body or my brain behaving normally. And I just turn around and, you know, hit a podcast or whatever, and I'm gone in less than 5 minutes, in 2 minutes, I'd say. And it's funny, because if I'm going to bed, depending on my level of tiredness, but once I hit my podcast or my whatever and start listening, I'm gone. It's, you know, my brain has been trained that way, like, you know, unless I've consumed copious amounts of coffee, which has happened on occasion. And coffee blocks adenosine receptors in the brain. There's two big mechanisms for. There's a few different mechanisms. We'll talk about two of the big ones, right? So melatonin is one of them, a buildup of melatonin, and also a buildup of sleep pressure and adenosine. So in the presence of light, adenosine builds up in the brain. That's actually a plaque, and the sleep pressure and the melatonin combine, and boom, it tilts us into sleep. Like, sleep is complex. It's a complex neurological event that we don't think about, but we can mess it up by drinking too much coffee or tea or caffeinated products or blue light or heat. I mean, right now the weather is fantastic. I'm sure people are waking up because of the heat. You know.
Can I bring things back to the MMA side of things?
Sure.
One of the big sides to Urban Gym is obviously the MMA side. There's a good strong MMA team that's growing, and you talk a lot about the different kind of array of professional athletes that you've worked. It's well documented that you spent time working with the SBG team and with the McGregor camp around the Floyd Mayweather fight.
Yes.
Without kind of, breaking confidentiality around it.
Yeah.
What does and this kind of ties in. You're talking with people that are looking at somebody that comes along and says, I can do this, I can do absolutely anything. You've got the talent end of it as well, but then you've also got you've got one of the biggest events in professional sports history. You've got an awful lot riding on it. You've got millions of people looking at it. You've got millions in terms of revenue on the table. That's got to play on people and something. I don't want to guess what Conor McGregor was up to, but what was your experience in around that, and how were you brought in for something like that as well?
It was interesting to say the least. It was. I mean, I at that time I was working with Jamie Heaslip on a 1-to-1. I was working with John Muldoon, and he was a captain. I was working with a couple of other guys. I was working at a good level. But like, I had a relationship with John Kavanagh prior to that. I had given a sleep workshop in SBG about a year and a half before that. So I mean, talking about a mindset. I kind of said 2 years prior to working with Conor in that camp, I'm going to get that guy. So it took me 2 years. But I actually had a plan there, and I put it into action, and there you go.
Wow.
So I mean, it was kind of surreal, because there was, I'd just get the call or whatever, and the team would come together. And now I had a good relationship with John prior to that, because I'd gone in, I'd given workshops to those guys, a few of the lads in there and all that. And John asked me to keep in touch, and I kept in touch. And then it was kind of good timing as well, because I think our first meeting never happened because the baby kept him awake all night, which is great. he didn't show up to meet me because he was kept awake all night. Well, so it was surreal. For me, it was surreal because the world was kind of watching, and 25, 30 people would come together every time, and Conor would rock up or whatever else, like, and it was an amazing experience. And it was, again, there was many different reasons there for it, but I think the fact that I could bring a number and a figure and bring science to something that wasn't, I could predict its reaction time, and the openness and whatever else to you know, every little avenue, every little thing that we can control. It was fascinating for me. It was great for me to be part of the camp, to watch it, to be there, and to analyze and to monitor and to kind of, you know, to make the full team as well aware of the importance of sleep and all that. Like, so I mean, I was doing well anyway, but that was obviously great for me, and it's an experience I won't forget, you know. So yeah, it was very interesting.
I should have hired you, Tom, not to help me go to sleep, but to help me put some of those SBG fires to sleep. Because that might have been a better way for me to hire you, Tom.
Very good, excellent.
At that level, Tom, at that level of performance, I mean, what are you looking for in the athlete from kind of internal factors or external factors around their sleep?
I mean, like, you know, I mean, part of that, a big part of that is the education piece, like, right? First off, it's your starting point, like, you know, and there's like, it's like communicating that to the athlete. How do you communicate that to this guy who the world, you know, people don't understand like how many demands is on like someone like him. The world is watching. Everyone wants a piece of him. Everyone wants 5 seconds of his time, and there you've got like literally seconds to get your message across to him, like, you know. And I'll tell you a story. My first meeting, like, I mean, he actually, I'll tell you a story, right? I don't know if I should or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway, right? My first meeting, he was, I think it was the day after he signed the contract, but anyway, it was one of his first sparring sessions. And I think it was his first sparring session. I was waiting to see him. I was with Julian Dalby and waiting to see Conor, and he was sparring, and the next thing there was a bit of a hoo-ha. Something happened. And I said, something's going on here because people are running around the place. And then Julian ran past me. He said, I have to go. He's after cutting his eye. So in the, you know, 6 to 8 weeks before, he cut his eye, and Julian ran out to get glue to glue his eye shut. And he came back half an hour later, said, right, come with me. And we went in the back of the gym, and Conor had a shower, and I went upstairs. So my first meeting with him was in this very narrow corridor upstairs, and he wasn't a happy bunny, you know. He was obviously, you know, worried and all that, whatever else. But like he was striding up and down this little narrow thing, and I was just standing there like, you know, and he'd a cut in his eye under here, and he you know, Dr. Dalby put him on the ground right in front of me and just glued it shut, like. And he jumped up, and his first words to me were, look at the state of me eye. That was his first words to me. And of course, my first words to him were, you know, Conor, most tissue repair happens when you're asleep. So it's like, that's true. Growth hormone, 75% of it is secreted by the pineal gland when you're sleeping, during the first 2 deep phases of sleep. That's when the most growth hormone, that's when the most tissue repair occurs. So, you know, and to be honest, like, you know, he was a bit demented with it, like, and you know, I was there chatting to him for a few minutes, but he actually wasn't really there, because he was just, this was annoying him, you know. So he just said, look, he said, can we do it next? Because I was fitting him out with the tech and all that, and I said, look, my head isn't in it. Can we do it another time? He said, I said, no problem, Conor, don't worry about it. So that was my first surreal kind of experience. And then, you know, a couple of weeks later, I kidded him out with the stuff, and I got more time with him, and I got to kind of explain everything. And so I brought the educational piece in to I hoped guys around him, like George Lockhart was doing his nutrition at the time, right? So I met George there, and I just sort of said to George, listen, whatever time he's going to bed, like 3 hours before, he needs to be having this. Certain foods will help bring on sleep. They contain an amino acid called tryptophan that will really help induce sleep. Then you have, like with that growth hormone I spoke about, that's hitting the bloodstream. So, I mean, it's a great idea to have a slow absorbing protein like casein 2 or 3 hours before you're sleeping, so that you have amino acids hitting the bloodstream at the same time as growth hormone. So you're actually harnessing the power of your own hormones to induce muscle building, repair, and recovery. And what, I mean, as I said, most of it happens at night. So like that kind of thing, integrating with his team, and even explaining to some of his friends and teammates, listen, he needs to be looking after his sleep, because if not, his reaction time is going to be down, you know. And that was the key thing, reaction time. For me, like for Conor, whatever else, like, you know, it wasn't about the stamina or the speed it was the reaction time. Because, you know, 100th of a second is the difference between this and, you know, this or whatever in MMA. You all know that, like. So.
And against Floyd Mayweather, whose, you know, reaction times in boxing are just unbelievable and off the chart. Like, you know, he's fighting the best defensive boxer in the world. So, one of my recollections of that Mayweather fight was McGregor landing that uppercut. Like, or just kind of, you know, coming up with that uppercut.
Yeah.
Certainly Mayweather respected the power, because the first 3 rounds he's coming out like an excellent fighter, you know. So I like Conor's camp, you know, love him or hate him, you've got to respect him, that is for sure. And the fact, like, you look at him bringing in someone like yourself for the sleep, Ido Portal, you know, with the whole movement aspect, the whole, you know, even now Tony Robbins with the psychology side of things. And another big thing that stands out to me from the Mayweather fight was McGregor's boxing ring, with the image of him landing that left shot on Mayweather. So every day he's walking in, he's visualizing, he's seeing that. You know, he talks about visualization. Most professional fighters now, like myself included, would visualize. But it's all them. It's not like the food pyramid that you get towards the tip of the iceberg. You know, you have obviously your training, your nutrition, and all that, but this is that point where you're really kind of adding them extra bits that can really take you to the next level. And sleep is obviously huge. Visualization.
Yeah, because I mean, it impacts all those things. Even Ido Portal, I remember having because he was there, and I remember having a conversation with him, and like I was kind of surprised that he didn't know a little bit more than about sleep. You know, I mean, like, obviously, look, the guy's a guru when it comes to the movement end of things, and fantastic or whatever else. But like, you know, I was just explaining a little bit about like what I was doing there to him when we got kind of chatting. You know, because you get chatting to the guys, all the different guys, like, and he had massage guys, and he had the guys who done his gloves, and Tommy McCormick and all that, and, you know, sparring partners, all those guys, John and Owen Roddy and all those guys or whatever, you know. And you'd be talking to those guys, but don't, like, these are the things, but like the percentage differences, like, just to give you an idea, something like shot accuracy, right? So collegiate basketball players are measured. They measure like 20 guys, and they have them doing 100 free throws, 100 shots at 3-point line, 100 shots, and then they have them on 6 hours sleep doing that, and then they test all these guys with all these shots, and then they give them, you know, 6 hours and 8 hours, and they're coming back with about 9% of a shot accuracy difference. So like, that's big. And then the other thing is, like I mentioned, reaction time. There's 2 types of reaction, right? There's instantaneous reaction, where you just have to react to something. You don't have to make a choice. And then the second type of reaction time is that we've got 2 or 3 choices. So within a fight, I mean, like, to put that in context, maybe you've got a punch coming at you. I'm not a fighter, but you've got a punch, but you just get out of the way or whatever else. But like, maybe you're seeing this swing and think, okay, am I gonna come around here with an overhand, or do this, or am I going to kick, or how am I going to? So all of those things are influenced in sleep, you know. So there isn't, again, I think it was Matthew Walker that said, there isn't a single aspect of your psychology or physiology that isn't impacted from a poor night's sleep, which is frightening.
I guess Yeah, sorry, I'll let Ken ask you a question.
No, it's okay.
No, because I know we're talking along the lines of athletes here, but I'm also thinking like, you know, just your everyday person now, like your parents or you know, people now who are asked to do more roles within the job. They're working longer hours. They're getting maybe less time with the family, and then they're maybe staying up later.
Yeah.
Comes a vicious cycle where, you know, every day they're feeling tired, and as you said, that over a course of a week they're not getting their appropriate sleep.
Yeah.
And you know, that idea of volume over time, it's just, you might feel okay for a couple of weeks, but then you're just basically a plane crash. You're just
it's a spiral down.
Yeah,
we know. I mean, like, there isn't an aspect like let's just talk about some of the things that happen, right? So if you get like just three lads here, so we talk about testosterone. If you get less than 5 hours sleep 2 nights in a row, your testosterone levels drop to that of a man 10 years older. That's a pretty significant drop pretty damn quickly, right? So, I mean, for someone in the gym, we know what testosterone does, right? We want it, right, as men. Now, the ladies don't worry because they have 1/10 the testosterone that men have, right? Cortisol, the stress hormone. We know if you're sleep deprived, cortisol levels remain elevated for longer. So with cortisol, with all of these things, it's about balance. We know that, right? Your endocrine system functions and balances throughout. One goes up, then agonist and antagonist. But if we are sleep deprived, cortisol will be elevated for longer, which means that our bodies will store fat. Will choose to store fat. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone. We're all driven by these things we don't even know, right? But what tells you to eat is ghrelin. It's a hormone called ghrelin. And what tells you to stop eating is something called leptin, right? Along with stomach receptors, along with a few other chemical signals. But if you're sleep deprived, your ghrelin level goes up, which essentially tells your brain to eat chocolate bars, and your leptin level goes down, that's the handbrake gone off. So, and then that's happening every night. So like you miss out on sleep, we know your mood is impacted. Mm-hmm. So you're in a bad mood. We know that if you have carbohydrate, your mood is lifted. So what's happening? The ghrelin level goes down. The ghrelin level goes up, the leptin goes down, you're eating rubbish, and your body's stored it as fat. And those are very kind of real examples of what's happening to people, some people every day, and they're wondering why they're struggling, and they can't find the willpower, they can't find because they're fighting against all these really powerful neurotransmitters and hormones that are messed up because their bodies are inflamed, they're not getting enough sleep, they're fatigued, they're not making good decisions, and it tends to be a spiral up or a spiral down with these things.
For something that you're able to kind of train yourself for so long, it seems like a very quick way to undo an awful lot of good work.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not something like you see guys in the gym or on the road or on the pitch, or you see guys like really, putting the work in, like hurting themselves, like pushing. And then they might come back and they might make a poor decision around food. They might not. They might make a good decision around food. It's one of the 3 pillars. I mean, Harvard tells us that, like, in terms of health, and I would say performance, the 3 pillars: sleep, nutrition, physical activity. There we go. So, and they say of equal importance, and that should, like, put it into context for people. It's equally important to what you're eating. It's equally important to the amount of training. Like, imagine one of your guys in the gym that just finishes the sessions and he just don't drink water. He drinks soft drinks and he just goes to the chipper. You'd be saying, what are you doing? You'd be saying, what are you doing? Like, the fuel you're putting into, you'd question it, wouldn't you? No one ever questions sleep. No one ever. But I know there's athletes who train hard, eat well, and then they're on their phones scrolling for 2 hours, 3 hours, watching TikTok or Facebook or whatever. Watching movies. They're up half the night, and they're not. They're just not getting to. They're shooting themselves in the foot. All that hard work, all that effort, all that. So, like, I just think, like, it should be sacrosanct. It should be absolutely sacrosanct especially for an athlete, especially for someone who wants to get results. Very, very powerful.
With that thought in mind, then, for the MMA teams and the BJJ teams that are at Urban Gym, and you've got a lot of young guys that are coming in, and they see the professional athletes and they're going, "That's where I want to be," and then they see their mates doing it and they're going, "That's where I want to be," and they see it on the telly and they go, "I want to look cool, I want to do that." They'll go through the training and they'll go through the motion and they'll put the rounds in. But if you're like, you were walking into doing a session in SBG, if you're walking into these younger guys who aren't, they may have professional aspirations, if that element is should be sacrosanct, what's your advice to them, or what's the first thing that you'd say to the new guys, to the new trainees, to those that have those kind of ambitions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's never been tougher for those type of guys. Like I'm an old dude, right? So I mean, I didn't grow up with social media. Probably thankfully, in some ways, I mean, like, I'm a big fan. I mean, I like social media. I'm on social media. I love it. I think it's got so many positive aspects. People give it a hard time, but like, it can interfere if it's not. It's like anything else. If it's not used correctly, then it can interfere with other things in our lives. We have to try and control it. So again, it goes down to that mindset of what are you willing to sacrifice, and sometimes it's bloody boring. I mean, one of the top coaches in the world was asked, "What's the difference?" And that was one of my questions. What's the difference between guys who make it and guys who don't make it? Now, this coach said, he didn't say nutrition, he didn't say sleep, he said those people who can deal with the boredom of it. The boredom of going in there to that gym every day and just grinding out those sessions. The athletes who can just deal with the level of boredom and consistency of going home and eating the same food, or eating, doing that prep or doing that thing. It's like, that's the thing that you need to just try and get a handle on that. And it doesn't take that long to form a habit, and we're learning more and more about the science of habit forming. So I would say to those guys, realize that it impacts your ability to recover, your energy system, your muscle gain, your strength, your reaction time, your stamina, in the same way as missing training sessions, or in the same way as not eating correctly does, at least in the same way. And then I suppose, look, all we have to deal with or do is look at what's in front of us. And I'm sure you deal with guys who are like, I want to be here, and they want to be like, you're like, going, right, you just have to go from here up to here. You just have to take the next step. You just have to do what's in front of you today, not get there, whatever. So what I say to those guys is try and get a handle on it. We're not expecting perfection. Start to write it down. If you start writing things down for yourselves, I mean, recording training, recording food, like even in a rough manner, but you start writing it down. Something happens, something called the observer effect, or the Hawthorne effect, it's called. And it was discovered in the 1950s by a factory owner called Hawthorne. And what he done was he wanted to increase productivity in his factory. And what he done was he thought, if I turn the lights up, maybe people will work harder. So he turned the lights up, and sure enough, productivity went up. And he was delighted. And then a couple of weeks later, he thought, well, I'll turn the lights down again. And he turned the lights down, and he thought productivity would go down, but it didn't. It actually went up again. And he was stunned, and he found out that what was happening was people thought they were being watched with the lights going up and down, so they actually worked harder. So if you see the lights going up and down in the gym,
I'm going to try that, Tom.
you know what's happening, right?
The lights again flicked on and off.
So scientists discovered that when people are being observed, they are better and they work harder. And even if that observation is coming from themselves, it causes an improvement in habit. So that's what I'd say to the guys. Start kind of looking at your sleep. You're not going to do anything about it until you value it enough. And you see your testosterone levels, and you see your muscle gain, and you see your recovery, and you see so that you have to understand it first, and then you start to improve it. If you can record it, you can improve it. And those are the differences that guys won't take care of. They'll do the same work. They might take as many protein shakes, or they eat the same food, but it's those little things that they go, or they won't do it, or they're up half the night. And you'll get, the gains you will get will be phenomenal, you know.
Andy, we put a call out for a couple of questions, and Tom, we haven't done kind of many kind of Q&A side of things where we've asked people to chip in with their own questions, but we threw out the feelers for a couple of people. One that came through the urban gym side of things says that, and if you're okay kind of answering this, because we're kind of springing things on you.
Yeah, spring it on me and see what happens.
They say that I'm recently experiencing interrupted sleep. It was never an issue before, due to that phase of life that I'm entering. Yes. I'm not alone. I would imagine by the age bracket of some of my female gym buddies, it might be of interest to. And if you would consider discussing sleep in premenopausal or menopausal women, its impact not only on energy levels but on mental and physical health. Is that something you've dealt with, or?
Yeah, I mean, perimenopausal or premenopausal women experience hot flushes and cold sweats at night, and that's down to several different reasons. That period of life they're going through, fertility, sex hormones are changing. One of those is progesterone. So you have the estrogen and progesterone cycle. I'm not going to get into it, but progesterone is one of those hormones that really drops off for women of that age. And progesterone plays a key role in relaxation and sleep. So this is why you're experiencing the sleep difficulties, and it's very common. Okay. And they call them, I believe, vasomotor phenomena or symptoms, which is, you know, the vasodilation or whatever. So they've kind of difficulty regulating heat in the body. And then, as I said, temperature is one of those key drivers or external cues for sleep and wake. So what's happening is that they're experiencing the flushes, the hot flushes and the sweats both, and disruption in sleep. What can they do? In terms of nutrition, I would say to them, you know, avoid spicy food, avoid high-fat food before bedtime, avoid alcohol certainly. If they eat soy products or linseed, both of those contain something called phytoestrogens. Phyto meaning plant estrogens. They're not real estrogens. But what will happen is they will bind, the phytoestrogens they consume will bind to estrogen receptors in their bodies and cause a rise, and that can help with those vasomotor symptoms. The other thing would be to have a fan in the bedroom, and just loose clothes. Don't like, you know, don't have your pajamas, whatever. Like, the colder your room, for generally anyway, the better. You know. So have a little fan by the bed that if you do wake up, you can pop that on. Try the soy products containing phytoestrogens or the linseed or flaxseed. Outside of that, you're talking about speaking with your GP to talk about HRT, hormone replacement. That is not always appropriate for everyone, but those little things might make a difference for them, and it will ease a little bit for them, I hope. I hope I covered that.
Wow.
Good
Thanks so much for that. That was like on the spot. I was like, this is a great question, great answer. There's so many people out there, no doubt, that, well, every lady goes through that. So thanks so much for answering that.
No, that's all right. I don't know if you've seen BO. I was doing the BO talks for Aileen Gary last year, I think it was, and it's nearly all women. And this woman was like, she had a question at the end of my talk, and I actually addressed this in my talk, and she had a question, and she said, I was so looking forward to this. And I thought, who's the sleep speaker? Is it a woman? It's like, oh Christ, it's a man. Oh, sure, he won't know. Oh Jesus, who's this fella? Oh, sure, he won't know. And she said, when you start talking about menopause, she goes, I could not believe it. I was stunned. She said, I've been to so many different talks and no one's mentioned. She was like, I'm so thankful. So I got a big round of applause from all the women. But of course, it's a big issue for those women, and my heart goes out to them. And then the other usual thing I'd like to say is just for generally anyway, and for those women is your sleep hygiene, your sleep habit. So temperature of the room, 16 to 18 degrees is quite cool, and that's the recommendation, as cool as possible. The other things are not to eat 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Very difficult for guys who are training hard. Maybe they're finishing their sessions at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they're going, all right, okay, I've got to eat. So that's where your prep is important. Have something in your bag, get it into you, because that's really important for your recovery as well. If you go to bed in an empty stomach, your sleep is going to be disrupted. Your body's going to start waking up looking for calories, right? So try and get that balance right for yourself, the timing, right? Stimulants and sedatives, avoid them completely if you can. If you're looking at performance, then you're not going to be drinking coffee today. 3 hours before the event you're going to be plowed into you, because we do know that it does impact positively on hand-to-eye coordination, right, and reaction time. So, and you'll get a better kick off the caffeine than if you're consuming it all the time. But generally for sleep, stimulants and sedatives we need to avoid. Routine is crucial, absolutely crucial. The blue light in the phones interferes with melatonin production, essentially tells your brain to wake up, so watch out for that as well. So all of those kind of tips for us, the ritual, the food, the stimulants, the sedatives, the environment, earplugs, eye mask, exception. Eye mask is one of those things that will instantly improve your sleep quality.
Wow. I've got one more question that came in.
Sure.
From a chap who said he has no problem at all in getting to sleep.
It's the waking up bit.
No, it's actually I just read it off the other screen here. He's got no problem in getting to sleep. It's his second sleep. So if he wakes at any stage during the night, he feels that there's something there. He's kind of resigned to not getting back to sleep. So if he wakes at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, he's like, that's it. That's my sleep done. And try as he might, whether he's trying too hard, but try as he might, he cannot get back to sleep.
Okay, because what I'm going to explain now, I hope it will make sense to him. The first 3 hours sleep you get is the deepest and most restorative, right? So if he's getting 2 or 3 cycles, which is 3 hours or 4.5 hours, that's going to be his best, deepest sleep, right? Everyone, not just him, everyone. Because what happens is, in your first 90-minute cycle, your deep sleep is quite long. And your second cycle, your deep sleep is quite long. Because what happens is, do you remember I said earlier that you dream more? Mm-hmm. And so you're very close to a waking state when you're actually dreaming, okay? So your second phase, your third phase, your dream state is getting longer, your fourth phase. Now, on top of that, so when you go into cycle 3, cycle 4, cycle 5, you're closer to waking up, and you're in a much shallower sleep. Also, testosterone is secreted during the night. Cycle 3, cycle 4, cycle 5, and cortisol starts being secreted as well to wake you up. So what's happening essentially is, in your 7.5 to 8 hour block, is after the first 3 hours, you actually start, your sleep gets lighter and more broken. You actually start waking up. So that's why he feels that when he wakes up, that no matter what he does, he's never going to get back to that very, very deep sleep. And he probably isn't going to get back to that very, very deep sleep. And that's, very common experience. Depending on his age as well, what tends to happen is as we get older, we experience something called a phasal shift. So we fall asleep earlier and we wake up earlier. Teenagers, for anyone out there, they experience the opposite. They don't want to go to bed and they stay up later and then they get up later. You can't get them out of the bloody bed, right? It will pass when they're about 26, don't worry. So that's a phasal shift the other way. So for our friend, I understand that feeling of not getting back to that really, because it's great when you get a good night's sleep. It's great when you're in that, you get really deep sleep. You're like, oh my God, that was fantastic. And you want that. You want to get into that, but it's not going to. You feel like, oh, it's not going to happen, or it's not. That's why it's not going to feel like that. But it's important that you do get it, because again, a lot happening for the brain, a lot happening in mental restoration. So what I would say is, what you have to do is, first off, understand what's happening, which I hope I have explained, and then do your little ritual of, what puts you to sleep, even if it's a 5, 10, 15-minute ritual. Is it a deep breathing exercise? Is it a body scan? Is it a meditation? Is it a podcast? Is it something that you do that will help you? So when you wake up, and of course, what does everyone do when they wake up? They check their phone and they go, I knew it, I'm awake again. I always wake up at this time. And again, that's like that self-fulfilling prophecy of, so I would say to you, don't check the phone, have your strategy ready, have your breathing exercise. So when you wake up, go, okay, I've come out of my 2 very deep cycles. I know what's happening. That's grand. I'm going to do my ritual now. Actually, I'm going to try and stay awake. Because if you try and stay awake, you're more likely to fall asleep than if you're one of those people who are like, I'm going to try and I have to sleep. If you get stressed out, right, you've activated your fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. If you stress, which means your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, and your brain is looking for danger. So what you want to do is not stress out. Deep breathe. Do that. That stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and recover. So for our friend here who experiences that, it's very common. Learn a breathing exercise and don't give yourself a hard time, and get 2 more cycles if you can, or 3 more cycles.
I think, Tom, that was one of the big things. I was at your talk at Thrive, Marina and I, and
yes,
we absolutely loved that. That was an awesome talk. The big thing I took from it as well was what you just mentioned there. The odd time I would wake the middle of the night, say 3 or 4, let's say, and you're dead right. You automatically turn and look at your phone, and you get that shock of a big blue light, and then
that's right, yeah.
And a lot of the time for me in the gym, I'm teaching a class. It's maybe 6 or 6:30 in the morning, so I'm kind of waking. I'm like, I'm up now in an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I find it hard to get back to sleep. But I do find the eye mask is certainly a big help, and I do find it hard to leave the phone out of the room. I'm still one of the guys that use the phone as an alarm, but I think the eye mask is a really great way to avoid that shock of automatically turning to the phone and then getting that dark to blue light. At least if you realize, accept you're woken through your cycle. Maybe take a breath or 2 and then try and drift off, rather than look at the phone, bright light, state of anxiety, state of maybe heightened stress. Then shit, I only have an hour. Left.
100%. And like you're gonna no matter how, especially nowadays, let's be like this time of year, like it's getting bright at ridiculously early in the morning, and how sensitive you are to that, because one little crack in the curtain is enough to take an hour or 2 hours off your sleep.
Yes.
So we have photoreceptors in our eyes which are exceptionally sensitive to light. So the eye mask is just it's been a game changer for some people I've spoken to they're like, oh, I never thought of that. It's like €5. Put this eye mask on. I was like, oh my god! Like instantly, my sleep quality, they feel better the first night. Like some of the stuff I'm talking about might take you 6 weeks to train yourself to do, but this is like €5 the first night, right? Just do it, okay? It's a no-brainer. But the two biggest drivers are light. They call light the master switch when it comes to sleep. So controlling light. The other one I mentioned, melatonin. If people really do suffer, maybe they should consider talking to their GP about supplementing with melatonin if they're finding it hard. We produce serotonin upon waking, and that's a precursor to melatonin. So get a strong light signal early in the day. Get outside. Get lots. Very easy this weather, right? You and me, Andy, we're going to sleep really well tonight. I was outside with my young fella today, and for hours and hours and hours, and loads of bright light. I'm not designed for that. Like looking at the colour of me, but I'm going to sleep very well because I know my serotonin and melatonin will be flying.
Yeah, I think Tom, that's an interesting point because.
And he's gone
with the whole COVID situation.
Oh, yeah.
No, sorry. I was just saying, Tom. I think that's an interesting point because you mentioned daylight, and I think a lot of people maybe throughout this whole situation there's a fear of going outdoors or going for a walk.
Yeah.
Rena and I were very fortunate. We live out in the country, so we can get out and go for a walk and get that fresh air. We're not really likely to meet anybody on a walk down the road. Whereas maybe people who are in towns or cities right now aren't getting out for the daily bit of sunshine or whatever. I know things have relaxed a bit now, all right.
Yeah.
But early days, I'm sure that was hugely, And
I know it's true. You're right.
Actually.
And you brought up something else there, something else which is a phenomena which people are going through is vivid dreaming. Yeah. I don't know if you've experienced it, but a lot of people are having very weird dreams now. And that's something called pandemic dreaming. It's a real thing. There's about 7 studies ongoing now looking at pandemic dreaming since COVID-19. The Google searches for weird dreams has doubled from this time last year.
Wow.
Right. So and let's just quickly look at that, and it ties into something else I want to talk about briefly. So our brain uses dreams as a defense mechanism. Our brain uses dreams to simulate dangers and threats to us. And what's happening at the moment is all of us are locked inside our houses, so we don't have the usual kind of inputs. So our environment and our inputs have completely changed, and they're very limited now. And we have that, and then we have this thing called anticipatory anxiety, where we don't know what's going to happen. So that's very stressful. Now, if you have an argument with your partner, that's a stressful event, and what your brain does is it processes that and it stores some of that in long-term memory when you're asleep. It can't do that with the anticipatory anxiety stuff. So we have a combination of a lack of input and anticipatory anxiety. On top of that, we have a virus, which is something unseen. We can't see it, but it's a threat. And so what that's causing your brain to do is to reach into the nether regions and look for very symbolic stuff to represent that. So for any of your listeners out there, if you are experiencing or have been experiencing really weird dreams, right, don't worry about it. It's your brain trying to process what's happening in COVID-19.
Wow.
And that's another sort of fascinating area of sleep, and that ties into something else I want to talk about, because there's no better time to analyze your life than 2 o'clock in the morning when you wake up, right? You wake up, you can't get to sleep, you're like, what am I doing with my life? And 20 minutes later, you've lost the job, the girlfriend, the house, the car. So something's happening there, and I know for people who don't switch off before they go to sleep, that part of your brain that solves problems, right? Prefrontal cortex. It solves problems. It deals with all of those different issues. So if you're working, you've stimulated that area. You need to switch that area off because the very same area is in charge of worrying. So if you've been working very hard, you've been giving your brain all this stuff, and then you just cut that off, and it's still very much stimulated, your brain is going to start worrying. So, one of the things you can do is, the meditation or the body scan or writing stuff down or something like that. But that's actually what's happening. The thalamus and the hypothalamus in charge of memory and emotion. Also, they will start putting things together, and all of a sudden you start having those conversations like, what did she say to me today? What did he say to me today? And then you start watering that plant, and it gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden you're going to go in there. I'm going to go in there tomorrow and tell your man that he can go on, jump. So that guy is again kind of natural, you wake up in the morning and go, what the hell was I thinking last night? Don't worry about that. Disconnect, wind down, unwind the mind, forms part of your routine, of your ritual. So the brain is it's fascinating, really, and some parts of your brain are more active when you're sleeping than they are when you're awake.
Yes.
For many people, for all of us, but some people in particular, maybe. But yeah, that's something really interesting.
We're as I kind of always do, keeping an eye on time and where we're going. This feels like it's a conversation that could go on for another hour or two, but eventually we've got to press stop on things. We usually, Tom, do kind of a closing statements or closing thoughts. I'm going to pass it to Andy first. That look of surprise on the camera.
I wasn't great, Ken. I wasn't too good. Tom,
you could have got a menopause question, Andy.
Hey Tom, I always say there's always someone out there worse off than you are. That was you, my friend, with that question today. You came prepped.
But Andy, as we wrap up this month's podcast, any closing thoughts, questions, or remarks from you?
Yeah, no. As always, I just want to thank Tom for coming on. As I mentioned, I got to go to Tom's talk. We met for the first time at Thrive, and Maria and I just absolutely were fascinated by it. Obviously, as people who are pretty busy with their lives, myself, formerly fighting professionally, but now obviously running a gym. And it's something that, I did want to get across to maybe a lot of our members as well, people who come into us regularly, the importance. I spend a lot of my time, yes, we do our HIIT sessions, our strength and conditioning, BJJ, MMA and all of that. But I always try and emphasize the importance of things like, your relaxation, your winding down, things like yoga, your Pilates. This is all coming from a guy with cauliflower ears who's gone pretty hard for a long time in terms of training. But I've seen over the years that things like sleep are so important. And like that talk at Thrive was fascinating. I took a lot from it. And I just wanted to share that knowledge with our members and get it out there a little bit more. So on a personal level, thank you so much, Tom. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks so much for your time this evening. It's been awesome. It's been an awesome chat. And I think a lot of people get a lot of stuff from this,
Great.
Well, Tom, that's over to you. Any closing thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to thank Andy for asking me on. I really enjoyed the chat with Ken and Andy, so it was awesome coming on. And it's nice that we had the time to actually dive into some of those areas, because I'm always seem to be tight for time and get little time, and I really enjoy talking about it. It's fascinating to me. What I would say to people is, I deal a lot with shift workers, and I look a lot of the health implications of poor sleep over the course of the lifespan. And when the World Health Organization has shift work as a class 1 carcinogen, we know it has a profound impact on health. So it's not just about performance and recovery and health, or it's about health also. So, you know, look at, when I start to talk, usually I start talking to people about their health. You know, look after it, it's in your hands. So try and prioritize your sleep and look after it. And for the shift workers, I'm doing a lot of work in that area at the moment, even sort of new work that I haven't sort of put out there yet. I just struggle with time for the social media, the whole element. But if anyone wants to contact me directly, Tom Coleman on Instagram, it's probably the best way, or Tom at mynutritionireland.ie. Tom at mynutrition.ie, that's fine. And then I'll just finish with a few sort of key things for people. So I said prioritize it, the ritual, try and go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. Your brain loves habits, and it breeds security, okay? Whereas like stress and anxiety and all that kind of stuff, if we're irregular, so we like patterns. That's why you wake up at the same time on a Saturday if you're going to work Monday to Friday, right? So the routine, watch the stimulants and the sedatives, control the blue light. We want very good, strong, bright light early in the day. As the day progresses and the evening comes in, avoid the light. And the food, dovetail the food with your training. So prep for that, get it into you, 3 to 1 carbohydrate to protein, get some high tryptophan foods like lean proteins or cereals or dairy into you as well. That will help with sleep onset. Magnesium helps relax the nervous system, will help with sleep. Vitamin D, we don't need it now. Well, hopefully we don't need it now, but if you take a vitamin D as well, it can impact early in the day, magnesium later in the day. And if you really struggle with sleep, talk to your GP about melatonin, but control what you can, the light being the big one and the habit.
On that note, from me, Tom, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ken. My pleasure.
It's been absolutely fascinating. Genuinely fascinating. I think this is going to make a super listen for people, and that is a wrap then on this month's podcast. We will have all of Tom's links and details in the show notes. You can catch up on previous podcasts online at urbangym.ie. The videos are on YouTube, the audio is on all good channels, and until next time, we're done.